to this episode of my channel where I'll be taking up the lesson Silk Road by Nick Middleton. This chapter is basically about the journey of Nick Middleton, a Britisher, of doing Kora around the religious and sacred mountain Mount Kailash. The author left Ravu along with Daniel, an interpreter, and Satan, who was his driver. Before leaving Hamo, the lady who had provided them accommodation at Ravu, the Ravu is the name of a place in Tibet, and he had stayed there for some time. And being in Tibet without an interpreter would have been impossible. So he had an interpreter with him. His name was Daniel. So when he was leaving Ravu, the lady who had given him accommodation gave the author a gift of a long sleeved sheepskin coat as they were going to Mount Kailash, where it would be very cold. Satan knew a shortcut to reach the mountain, and he said the journey would be smooth if there was no snow. So what adjective can we use for Nick Middleton? He's adventurous, he's inquisitive, he wants to do something which normally nobody does. Okay, going around the treacherous mountain Mount Kailash. Now as they passed through the hills, they saw individual drogbas. Now what do we mean by drogbas? Drogbas means shepherds looking after their flocks. Now as they are going higher and higher, the human population decreases. They can only see handful of drogbas here and there. There were both men and women. They were wearing thick woolen clothes, obviously, because it is very cold there. They would stop and stare at their car, sometimes waving to them as they passed. So looking at the car was a very novel experience for these drogbas. They don't generally see cars in those areas. So they waved at them occasionally. As they passed the nomads' tents, they saw some Tibetan mastiffs. Before Tibetan mastiffs, they had seen gazelles, which are antelopes. They had seen ash, and now they are seeing the Tibetan mastiff. So they are seeing all kind of animals, the gazelles, the ass. Now the Tibetan mastiffs, which are huge dogs, which were dogs used by the shepherds. Whenever a car came close to their tents, they would bark furiously and fearlessly. They would chase the car for some distance and then go back. So, seeing this, the author observed that in earlier days, Tibetan mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs because they were so alert. They were brought along the Silk Road as a tax payment from Tibet. Now, first of all, why is this chapter called Silk Road? Because this is the route taken by the Europeans to do trade with China for silk. That's why it is known as the Silk Road. Secondly, why the name of the chapter is Silk Road? Because Nick Middleton has taken the same path from Europe to reach Mount Kailash. Now the turn becomes sharper and more difficult as they climbed. The author started getting a severe headache because as they are rising up in altitude, breathing becomes more and more difficult. Suddenly, snow started falling and soon blocked the road. Daniel and the author got out of the car to reduce its load on sharp bends. And the altimeter watch on the author's wrist indicated that they were at a height of 5210 meters above sea level. The icy top layer of the snow was dangerous and the car could slip off the road. So what could they do to prevent the car from overturning or slipping? They had to increase the friction, and for that they threw some dust on the ice. When they reached a height of 5515 meters, which was the top of the pass. Now what's a pass? It's a gap between or a path between two mountains. The atmospheric pressure became so low that Satan had to open the lid of the petrol tank to release the evaporated fuel. And that's why he gave a warning, no smoking. because the fuel was in the air. By late afternoon, they had reached the small town of Hor on the shore of the religious Lake Mansarovar, which was on the old trade route between Lhasa and Kashmir. Daniel returned to Lhasa from there. Satan got the flat tire of the car repaired there. But Hor was a very, very miserable place. There was no vegetation, just rock and dust everywhere. Unlike the past, the place no longer appeared holy, even though the Mansarovar was nearby. The only thing which was making the author feel happy was the Mansarovar lake. By 10:30 p.m., they reached Darchan, where they found a guest house to stay in. It was at the end of the road, but the author could not sleep that very night. His nostrils were blocked and he was not able to get enough air into his lungs. Most of the night, he sat up as he was unable to sleep. And he was also scared that if he slept, he won't be able to wake up the next morning. The next day, Satan took the author to Darchan Medical College, and the doctor gave him some kind of medicine which looked like sheep dung. But there was something very unique about the doctor. He had no paraphernalia of a doctor. What is paraphernalia? Any characteristic of a doctor. You know, the attire, the stethoscope. None of these things were being carried by this doctor. Anyways, the doctor told him that it was just cold and the altitude which were giving him trouble. Satan left the author in Darchan and went back with the car to Lhasa. So first Daniel left, now Satan. He did not mind if the author would die in Darchan. He was a good Buddhist and believed in life after death. However, he was worried that the author's death could affect his business, as he may not get more tourists who required to be accompanied till where the road ended. So now the road has ended. So now everything has to be covered by climbing on foot. Like Hor, Darchan was dusty and a lot of rubbish could be seen all around. The town appeared to be sparsely populated. There were no pilgrims there as the season had not yet started. You know, for every pilgrimage or any tourist site, there's a particular season when you see the outburst of tourists. So he had reached there early. So there were no tourists then. He actually wanted to reach Mount Kailash to do Kora to get a feel of what a pilgrimage was like, but he didn't want to do it alone. He was looking for someone who could speak or understand English. And that is when he met Norbu in a cafe. So when he was sitting in the only cafe at Darchan, Norbu, a plump Tibetan working in Beijing at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, saw him reading an English book. So Norbu introduced himself to the author. He also was there to do Kora, although he was not doing as a religious person. He was not religious. He was doing it as a part of his studies. So both of them decided to do Kora together. And from Norbu's physique, it's definitely clear he's not a very active person. Okay, because he's very plump. So I hope you have understood the lesson. Thank you.